University of Cumbria is one of our partners, and we're very pleased to have this important partner working with us. And through the University of Cumbria, there is a really exciting programme called Boom, which is about exploring the very cutting edge of nature conservation. In fact, it's going beyond nature conservation. Conservation has been exactly that, about conserving. And then perhaps in the last 20 or 30 years, people have started doing habitat recreation. And then moving on to the very cutting edge beyond that, you can start to look at species reintroductions. And that's what this Boom project is about. So shortly, I'm going to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Deborah Brady, and she's going to tell us all about the Boom project and the killer cute thing that is the dormouse, the Hazel Dormouse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Debs. She is a mammal ecologist working in mammal population management and reintroductions at the University of Cumbria. And she's leading the Boom species looking at dormouse reintroduction and the feasibility of introducing the pine marten. So, Debs, I was just going to introduce you, but before you dive into dormice, I have some quick-fire questions for you. So, Debs, what track would get you on the dance floor?
Does everybody get these?
No, especially for you. Go on. What track would get you on the dance floor?
Time warp.
You've got some popular vote, that one. What is your favourite type of weather?
Probably one extreme or the other. So either sun, so I can close my eyes and go to sleep in it, or snow, deep snow, and everything goes quiet.
I absolutely love a crispy, sparkly winter's day. That you can't really beat that sort of low light and the shine and sparkle of a crispy winter's day. But yeah, I'm with you. I like the heat too. Now then, Debs, last one. What is your hidden talent?
It's getting my teenager out of bed in the morning for school.
Well, the problem I'm having with my teenager is that she seems to be staying up later than me, not being a teenager, but doing revision for the chemistry test the next day or something. So getting to bed would be the problem I'm facing. Let's move on. Let's move on. Would you like to start your talk and share your screen?
Yeah. Just before, I just thank you for having me here tonight. And the turnout's amazing. There's 61 screens I can see, but there's loads of people at doubles. So I think it's probably 70 and above, isn't it? So that's fantastic. And I'm really happy to be here. So that's me, picture of me with hiding behind a mask, with a dormouse doing a survey. I work at the University of Cumbria, and at the minute part of a project called Boom, back on our map. So I'm just, for the first few slides, just going to talk through what Boom is for people who haven't come across it yet. The talk overall, this is what it was advertised as. So I'm going to talk through, after I've introduced Boom, I'll talk through the dormouse population in Britain, and what condition that's in, why it's like that, how we can start to reverse the trend, and where reintroductions fit into it. So that's what the body of the talk will be. So back on a map at the University of Cumbria is mostly funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, along with a few other funders. And there's four main partners: Cumbria Wildlife Trust, and it was developed in collaboration with these partners as well: Forestry England, Natural England, and Morecambe Bay Partnership. And the Morecambe Bay Partnership is particularly a day-to-day partnership with one of the members, Michelle, working on the project. The essence of the project is a multi-species reintroduction project with a range of species, working with communities to bring those species back. So the list of species, there's 12 of them. 10 of these are full reintroductions, so putting that plant or insect or animal back in. and the Hazel Dormouse is one of those. So there will be a Hazel Dormouse reintroduction. It would have happened this year, but that was cancelled with COVID to next year. And then two of them at the bottom of that list, pine marten and corncrake, are the pine marten is a feasibility study to look at the possibility of reintroduction and see whether it's appropriate, and the corncrake is a more of a sort of social cultural project looking at memories and things around that species. The Boom project as a whole is in the area that's highlighted in that picture. So there's quite a number of key areas within it, sort of Barrow, Grisdale, Whitbarrow, and so on. The dormouse element of it is in the Arnside and Silverdale AONB. This area was chosen, the south of Cumbria, for the project because there's been a lot of work over the last few decades in habitat restoration. So a lot of work in improving habitat, getting them back to the conditions that they should be, improving their status. But even with all that improvement, sometimes there was still species missing, and the only way to have those species back was to actually reintroduce them, to bring them back in. So the area was improved to that point, and then actually just needed a bit of a helping hand in bringing the species back in. Boom team is a team of 5 people, and you can see Michelle there that you might know already, and myself, and we're all working on different species or groups of species. The context for the Boom project was the sort of the wider global situation that we have. The Living Planet report now comes out every 2 years. So it came out a couple of months ago. And this year's report, there was 68% loss in global abundance of wildlife across the planet. So that's 2/3 of wildlife gone since 1970. So in my lifetime, and in many people's lifetime, the last sort of 50 years or so, 2/3 of wildlife on Earth gone, which is just horrendous, the scale of it. And when you look at it more locally, it's a similar situation. So the RSPB, you've got 1/5 of British birds lost in the last 50 years, so a similar timescale. Mammal Society, 1 in 5 British mammals facing extinction in the next decade. So a really, really sad situation. And when you look at all the countries in the world, we're actually one of the worst. So we come out 189th of all the countries in the world. And that's sometimes quite hard for sort of people to understand and grasp, because we haven't recently undergone that. A lot of that is historic over the last 100 years in land use changes in this country. So that was the context for the project. The massive loss of wildlife, both internationally and in this country, and to try and look at an area where we could actually start to make a difference in putting animals and plants back in. So Hazel Dormouse status in first of all. So internationally or globally, the Hazel Dormouse is found right across Europe. So Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and into parts of Russia, although not the southern end. So it's really quite extensive as a species. And across that area, the status, which is measured by the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and they're the organization that measure the status of all species, it's actually of least concern. So least concern on this scale, which goes right up to extinct. So across mainland Europe and Russia, the species is not of concern, but when you look at this country, it's actually classed as vulnerable. So not endangered or critically endangered yet, but vulnerable, so of concern. So the map on the left is the most recent distribution map of dormouse in the UK. And we're probably looking at about 1 million dormice, although the estimates vary quite a lot, from about 500,000 to 2.5 million. So somewhere in that range, with the majority of them found in the south and the west. So in England, it's vulnerable. They're not found in Scotland, and in Wales, it's vulnerable as well. And when you look at other assessments that have been done within Britain, so in 2013, the population size was in decline, although the range was stable. So not very good situation. And the other way that it's measured is the People's Trust for Endangered Species, who have been doing one of the longest running monitoring of any British mammal for the last almost 30 years. They've had a scheme set up where woodland sites are measured for the number of dormice in them across a year. So at least twice a year, but sometimes 6 times a year. So a really big national survey, which is run by them and hosted by them. And that shows a similar pattern. So the way that it's done is about 200 of these nest boxes are set up in the wood. And you can see in the bottom one, you've got a dormouse in torpor there, asleep in it. So 200 of these nest boxes, and they're checked regularly throughout these woods. And the pattern that is showing is very similar. So I've got a short video here. The sound quality is not very good, but it's mainly to show you what a dormouse nest looks like inside a nest box. And it's got my hand sort of checking around for a dormouse. So I'll show it, but if you could just bear with me with the sound. Yeah, this is a really clear cavity. It's really tightly woven. It's fantastic. I can't feel anything in there at all. So I've had a look in the cavity in the centre of the nest. I'm just going to go around the edges. And when I put my hand down, I can feel it as a ball. Really, even though it's just leaves, it's a really tight structure. Okay, I'm just going to have one more check inside the cavity. So the cavity is the entrance is there. So the dormouse would go in there and then into where they've made the cavity in the centre of all of this. And I can feel inside the cavity really clearly. And there's absolutely nothing in there. Okay, really sorry about the quality of that. But I did want to show it because you've got, you can see really nicely the dormouse nest that it's made within the nest box with the fresh hazel leaves that it's brought in and made that structure inside it. So this graph shows the results of that national monitoring programme. And basically over the last 20 years, we've lost about half of the population. So reduction of half of the national population in the last 20 years. So across all of those different measures, the picture is the same, that the population is in decline and not doing particularly well, sadly. These are probably the two most recent maps of Britain. The one on the left is 2013 and the one on the right is 2018. And you can see they're broadly the same, but there's a tiny bit of difference. On the 2013 one, you've got a little population up here in Northumberland, and that population, which was the most northerly population, has been lost in that time. So where we are in Cumbria, in south of Cumbria, down here, there is a very small extant population left, but we're right at the northern edge of the dormouse population in the country. So what was the situation historically? So the map on the left, on this side, is from 1885, and it was really built up from historical written records and naturalist recording and so on. And dormouse were found right up to the Scottish border. So theoretically, it is possible for dormouse to sort of go up to the border or the southern uplands of Scotland. And then the map on the right is similar to what you've just seen. You've got the current population, and on this map, the red dots are reintroductions that have been done by People's Trust for Endangered Species, which I'll come on to and describe. So why has that happened over the course of 100 years, and then particularly over the last 20, 30 years, a continuing decline? There is a range of reasons, but the primary reason is really to do with the habitat that they're living in. So changes in woodland management and farming practices and loss of hedgerows. with, to some extent, an impact of climate change, which I'm going to mention as well in a minute. So the habitat for dormice, what you really need, so there's two woodlands here. The woodland on the left, although it's a really beautiful woodland in South Cumbria, you can see there's not much understory. You've got bracken and some ground cover, and then you've got big standard trees coming out of that. The woodland on the right, you've still got the big standard trees and you've got the bracken at the bottom, but you've got a whole band in the middle of hazel and shrubs at that level. The dormouse is primarily arboreal, so it lives in the trees, and it needs a really strong 3D matrix within that shrub and small tree layer, so that it can move around between the shrubs, between the trees, and find its food. So that structure within the woodland is the most important thing for the dormouse to be able to survive there, alongside there being suitable food for it. So the dormouse doesn't just rely on one particular food source. It has a sort of a rolling program of food over the year. So when they come out of hibernation in April, May time, and then they go back into hibernation in October. So through that spring and summer and early autumn period, they rely on different foods through that period. So first of all, it might be the buds on trees, and then the flowers, and then aphids and small insects in the trees as they go through the summer. And then as the nuts ripen, they start to use the nuts on trees. But they very much need those different food sources coming in. So you need a really good biodiversity, a diversity of plants within the woodland, as well as that 3D structure. And that's what's been lost in a lot of woodlands. So if the woodland's not management and you've got a lot of deer browsing and so on, you end up losing that shrub layer and looking more like the woodland on the left-hand side, and you don't have the structure, and you don't have the food sources for the dormice to eat. So reintroduction of dormice has actually been going on for quite a while, almost 30 years. And throughout all that time, it's been managed by People's Trust for Endangered Species, and funded partly through Natural England. So there's been 28 reintroductions in that time, and almost 1,000 dormouse brought in at lots of different sites across the country. Sorry, just getting that back up. So lots of reintroductions by People's Trust for Endangered Species. And the map on the left-hand side is the same map that I showed you just before. And the red dots on it are where the reintroductions have happened already. The reintroductions by People's Trust for Endangered Species is from a captive breeding program. So breeders across the country, along with zoos, breed the dormice, and usually there's in the region of 50 or 60 dormice every year that are bred and are ready to be put back into a woodland. So those animals are bred, and then they go into quarantine, and they have vet checks, and then they are released into that chosen woodland. On the right-hand side, you can see another map, and you've got a sort of oval in the center. There was a review of the reintroduction process that was done 4 or 5 years ago, and that identified a priority area. And the feeling at the time was that we were losing dormouse so quickly that really the edge of the population should be the area where there was most reintroductions and there was reinforcement of the population. So the red zone in the map on the right-hand side was where the recommendation was that most reintroductions should happen. Obviously, we're north of that, we're up here, and outside of that primary zone. So the process of deciding whether we should reintroduce into the south of Cumbria has been quite a lengthy one and gone on for 3.5 years, the discussions and considerations around that. One of the things that was most important, or was important in helping that decision, was the thought about climate change. So the habitat has to be right for the population to be put back in. But when you look into the future, so 50 years into the future, and think about what would happen with climate change in this country, we can make predictions on what change is going to be and which areas are going to change the most. So I know the map is a little bit blurry, but the map that you can see on the left-hand side with all the green and blue areas, the blue areas in the middle are least likely to act as refuges. So they're going to experience most climate change. And then the areas that are green are going to potentially act as refuges for species with less climate change impacts. And you can see that the green areas are down in the southwest, but also up in the northwest and Cumbria particularly. So when you compare that to the zone for reintroduction, what you see is that zone of reintroduction kind of falls where potentially there's going to be big impacts of climate change. So there's an argument for putting dormice slightly outside of this area and into this area that might act as a potential refuge with climate change. So that was the decision that was come to, and we're working very closely, I've just ringed those so they're more obvious, with Yorkshire Dales National Park. At the minute, the reintroduction that happened in Yorkshire Dales National Park, so the blue dot with the red ring round on the right-hand side, that was done about 12 years ago, and they've still got a successful dormouse population there. At the minute, they're the most northerly reintroduction that has happened in this country, and we're almost on a par with them, but over on the other side, the other blue dot. So it was after sort of lots of consideration, which primarily looked at what the habitat was, whether it was suitable, and what diet was available for the dormouse, and then together with the sort of natural history characteristics of the animal. So is the area suitable? Is the habitat okay? Is the diet okay? And there's a grading system that you can go through for that to look at different woodlands. So within South Cumbria, we looked at about 20 initially potential woodlands to think about the habitat and the food sources alongside other criteria as well. The one remaining population that is doing well is where A is here. So this circle here is Roudsey National Nature Reserve, and there is a remaining dormouse population there. We also looked at the potential of reinforcing this population, or whether dormice might move out of Roudsey and recolonize areas around it. But dormice are notoriously bad at moving. They often might move less than 100 meters from where they were born, and even at the most only up to sort of 2 kilometers. So really this was to give them a helping hand, because the woodland that it was decided on for reintroduction is down here in the AONB. So the final decision from that work was to release 90 dormice into actually 3 woodlands in the end over 2 years. So that process would have started this year, and then we would have done the second reintroduction next year. It's all been put back a year with coronavirus, but it's still happening. So 40 or 50 dormice into one woodland, and then 40 or 50 the following year into a neighbouring woodland, and with a top up of about 10 into the woodland area in between. So really good healthy population, hopefully being put back into the AONB. So the role of Boom in that is to coordinate that work. So People's Trust for Endangered Species are the organisation that organise the nationally where the reintroduction is going to happen, and that manage the captive breeding process. And we're also working with Natural England to host some of the reintroduction, and in terms of the licensing. And also Yorkshire Dales National Park have been a really key partner in developing what we're going to do, but also in learning from experience and how reintroduction works in the north of England. And then a whole range of other partners within the project, either sort of to host the land or to work with, or for volunteers. So Boom really is coordinating it, the practical side, the volunteers, finding funding for it, licensing, organising licenses, doing the consultation and engagement like now, promoting the project, And also because we're university based, university research, and setting it within sort of the national context of mammal work and mammal research. That's just a pause, a nice dormouse to look at. So the actual reintroduction site, you've got the work before. How does it happen? We've got the work beforehand. So site preparation, so putting up the boxes, the nest boxes into the woodland, tubes to monitor, which I'll show you a picture of in a second, and cages, because it's a soft release process, which I'll show you. The actual release process, so bringing those 40 or 50 animals to the woodland and putting them into the cages, and then monitoring them afterwards. And really importantly, in the longer term, all of the follow-up to that. So working with public locally to make sure that people know what's happening, and there's consultation, but also promotion of the project. License training is really important. The little video that I showed you before, to check the nest boxes, you need to be licensed through Natural England. And what we're looking for is to work with people who are interested locally in becoming trained in being and in having a license, so that people can carry on doing that monitoring after this project has finished. So the longer term monitoring of it, and research questions. So this is a picture of a soft release cage. You can see within it the nest box, so you've got an idea of the scale of it. So within this cage, you've got water, and the animals are fed into a tube, and you've also got leaves and branches within it. And the animals are brought into the woodland, and they're put in pairs that they're familiar with inside the nest box, and they're left there for about 10 days, slightly weather dependent, and they're fed within that cage, and then the cage is opened, and they continue to be fed after that time. So once they're open and they can move out of that, they can come back and have food from that. So that's a soft release process. Conversely, a hard release is where you bring an animal and you just release it into the area. And that sometimes is used with mammal reintroductions as well. So this is a picture of the nest boxes that are used both for doing the surveys, but also just to provide the dormice with somewhere to use for during the day for resting, and they will build nests within it for breeding, and where the young are brought up. Not over the winter. They don't hibernate in the nest boxes. They tend to hibernate actually at the base of trees in the leaf matter underneath there, to try and regulate the temperature and the humidity. And this is a footprint tube or tunnel, and this is another way of monitoring and just checking on the dormice in the woodland. And you can see the picture on the bottom left. Dormice actually have got really distinctive feet, so you can see sort of the little triangles from their feet. And because they're arboreal, and they're almost like, when you look at them, they're almost like gecko type feet. They've got quite soft pads, so they've got really good contact with the branches and things when they're moving. So when you see them as footprints, they're really distinctive from other rodent species. So this is another little video clip. There's no volume to it, so I'm just going to talk through it. You do have to forgive me on this one as well. This is put together by me, and it's not my area or my forte, but I really wanted to show you some dormice moving and some elements of this. So it's only 1.5 minutes long, and there's me in the video and Ian from Yorkshire Dales National Park, and we were doing some survey work, but this is just to show you the process of checking a nest box. So you can see the nest box on the tree, and the bags opened up, and you take the whole of the nest box off and put it into the bag. So first of all, you've had a little look in to see whether there's a dormouse nest inside or any dormice, just a little peek into it. And if you think there is, then you take it off and put it into the bag so that the animals won't jump out once you open the lid of it. And then this box isn't inside the bag, but you do the same thing as before. So put your hand in and have a check inside it. And often the dormouse will just jump out at that point, or sometimes they'll be hiding more inside it. So in this one, you can see one dormouse jumping around, and my hands are just off screen, unfortunately, but you can see in my left hand, there is a dormouse, and I'm just having another little look in the box just to check that there's no more dormice in it. So that was a male and a female. So then you take the dormouse out of the bag and have a look at its sex, whether it's male or female, and what age it is, and collect some information around it. So here I'm just weighing it, so we can get an idea of the health of the dormouse. It seems to have relaxed a bit there. So I'm sorry, apologise for the quality of the video, but hopefully that was quite nice, actually seeing some dormice in action. So so that process of checking a box and looking at the dormice and getting information on them, what their sex is, what their age is, what their weight is, how healthy they are, that's part of the national dormouse monitoring that happens across all those woodlands every year. But also that's what would be done as part of the reintroduction project and putting them back in. To do that work, you need to be licensed, as I said earlier, and it is very much part of this project that we're hoping that there are people who are going to have enough commitment and interest in this to say that they would like to be licensed and to spend a couple of years with us coming out onto site and learning that process and building up the experience for that license. And volunteer involvement is really key to this project. And you've possibly been looking at the list whilst I've been talking there, but every stage of it is involving volunteers. So the initial preparation of the woodland, putting the nest boxes up and the footprint, bringing the animals in and releasing them, and then that monitoring with the footprints, the nest boxes afterwards, the surveys, helping with the events that we need to do as part of the project, and then that longer term monitoring into the future. All of those involve people who are living locally and are interested in being involved. And a sleepy dormouse at the end. And that's it.
Well, thank you so much. There we go. Thank you so much, Debs. Oh my goodness, my heart was bursting as they are unbelievably cute, these. These little fluff balls, they are so adorable. So now I want to plant woodland and have my own little colony of dormice. How big an area of wood do I need to plant to have my own reintroduction?
That's a good question.
You said they didn't move very far. Maybe I could. The fell behind me is all wood and it's got lots of hazel in it. Please, can I have some?
Maybe. So the home range is about, the biggest it would ever be really is about a hectare, and a hectare is 100 metres by 100 metres. More usual would be a tenth of that, so 0.1 of a hectare. So really quite a small area within a woodland. And there is overlap of male and female in territories. So really for a viable population, the minimum area that you'd be looking at is about 20 hectares, which is a reasonable size if you think about having to have that all in good management. So, so not just 20 hectares of any woodland, but 20 hectares of a well-managed woodland that has got good shrub and understory and diversity in it. So if your woodland is 20 hectares.
Not yet.
Yeah, the other sort of side of that is not just looking at the individual woodland itself, but the connectivity with other woodlands around it. And dormice will live very, very happily in hedgerows and well-maintained hedgerows. So either living there permanently or using hedgerows to connect woodland patches. So you could consider a smaller woodland, but with good connectivity between them to other woodlands. But really the longest that they've been recorded moving is about 2 kilometres. And there's also perceptual distances, so distances that and literally an animal can see and is willing to move to. And you're really looking at just sort of a couple of 100 metres for a dormouse. So they don't move. They're not good dispersers and colonisers.
Gosh, so many questions. I mean, I'm just bursting with questions, but I'm going to turn to the chat. And there's a question here from Michelle. Michelle, would you like to ask your question?
I can do, yeah, thank you. Brilliant, Debs. I just wondered what it feels like to handle a dormouse. What do they actually feel like? Do they feel like, pet mice, same sort of weight? What does their fur feel like? Because most of us will probably never handle a dormouse. So I just wondered if you could describe
really good questions.
What they feel like.
Really good questions. I've done quite a lot of squirrel work previously, handling and anesthetizing and working with squirrels, red and grey squirrels in woodlands. And I kind of expected similar to a red squirrel, so quite like moving quite long, quite hard to handle and potentially biting you. But dormice, they really are a pleasure to hold. They're very gentle, and when you hold them, when you've got them in your hand, they calm down often quite quickly. So you can hold them and you can literally feel their heartbeat just calming down as you're holding them. So they're actually quite straightforward to handle. They can, if you sometimes when you open the box, you can put the box in that bag that I showed you, and if they've got young, you can lift the lid off and young can kind of bounce out of it, sort of 4 or 5 little babies bouncing out, and then it's a bit manic and a bit busy. But if you just take your time, they're actually really easy. You said about their fur, Michelle, and that is actually one of the, it's quite distinguishing. The dormouse has got really soft fur, but it makes them quite vulnerable to weather. So they don't do very well when it's damp and wet. So they tend to, when the weather's like that, they tend to go into torpor. So even through the summer, they would go and rest in either somewhere they've created or a hollow or a nest box if they're available. So in a way so they go into torpor to sort of preserve what energy they have, but it is another disadvantage that dormice have in terms of survival, as lovely as they are.
Very jealous. That's lovely, thank you.
And the next question I had, Debs, was from Amy. I don't know, Amy, would you like to ask your question yourself?
Yeah, I can do. I was just wondering if you ever find anything else living in the dormice boxes, because they look quite like bird boxes. So I was just wondering if you ever came across any invaders.
Yeah, I almost put a video of a wren's nest into this, but I was a little bit worried about the videos working, so I didn't. So yeah, wrens. So a nice like nest of moss that they kind of make a hole in. Blue tits, other tits nest in them. Wood mice kind of use them to rest in. So you can open it, and wood mice, which are manic, can jump out sometimes.
And then we have a question from Bill Shannon. Would you like to ask your own question, Bill?
Yes, if I can remember how to unmute myself. Yeah, I was wondering, how were they nested naturally? You're showing these nest boxes about 1 metre off the ground, quite a small hole, like a blue tip box or whatever. So, you know, do they pinch birds' nests, or do they make their own nests in holes in trees, or how do they nest naturally?
Yeah, I've actually never seen a natural nest. Pictures, and I've talked to people, but the you know, on the first video you had a very clear green leaf structure, and they are incredibly tightly woven. They look quite messy on the outside, but when you put your hand inside, there's a really clear chamber on the inside and really tightly woven. So that nest structure that they create within the nest box itself, in the branches of a tree. So they're not wound into the tree like harvest mice are, but they're that ball of the leaves, or they can use honeysuckle strands or grass to make it. That would just be resting in the trees at a similar height.
Okay, so they're not looking for holes as such. They're not looking. Whoops, I've lost you.
Can you still see me?
I don't know.
No, we
okay.
can. Yeah, keep going. We've just got a picture coming up. That's all.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, so they're not looking for holes in trees or whatever. They would make a nest like a wood mouse or a harvest mouse in
I haven't heard of it.
Right, right, okay.
Yeah. And the hibernation, of course, isn't there. They do rest in the ground for hibernation, and it's thought that that's to do with stabilizing the external conditions, but particularly humidity, so they can actually dry out. So the humidity is really, really important, but they can come back awake during hibernation and move themselves as well. We've got a PhD student at the university who's actually investigating exactly that. So she's looking at various conditions inside a hibernation nest and outside, and trying to work out what the key things are that sort of make a successful hibernation.
Thank you.
That was me, Deb's messing with. I was just sharing that picture of the nest that Jim from Natural England found. I don't know if everyone can see that, but I thought people might like to just see it. I happen to have it on my computer, so I thought I'd just share it.
Yeah. So you got a nice mixture there of leaves and then moss and things.
And then we've got quite a few questions about volunteering and how volunteering works. I'm just looking here. Sonia Allen, I don't know you, Sonia, but if you'd like to ask, you've got 2 questions. I don't know if you'd like to ask your questions now. I'm going to ask them for you as I've not heard Sonia speak up. The first one Sonia asked was, do grey squirrels outcompete the dormouse for food and for hazelnuts and such like? And the second one was, if they overwinter on the ground, are they at risk from badgers? And once they work out where to find them, would they be seeking them out? What are the risks from predators?
So first one, grey squirrels. So when you have grey or red in a woodland, they tend to have specialise on the food source. So if it's a hazel woodland or oak or beech or spruce, so Sitka or Norway spruce, they're tree seed specialists. So squirrels need the tree seeds in that woodland, and then they store the seeds over the winter so that they can sustain their supplies. Dormouse very much rely on a sort of a rolling program of different food sources coming into the woodland, and some of those are quite short windows. So it might be the buds on a lime tree or the flowers on a blackberry, and then fruits of the blackberry later on in the year. So you've got a kind of rolling program of that. So as long as you've got really good diversity of food sources for the dormouse, potentially there's competition at that kind of pinch point where they're using the tree seeds, but in reality, the amount of tree seed in a woodland is rarely the limiting factor for either a squirrel population or a dormouse population. So in other words, there tends to be, at that point when the tree seed is mature, there tends to be plenty. So there tends to that doesn't limit. So therefore, there's not really a strong competition between them. Grey squirrel should probably be controlled for other reasons, but not for dormouse survival.
And then the question about competition and badgers.
There's not much research on predation. So there most probably is predation. It's more likely stoats and weasels. So dormice are very arboreal. So wood mouse and other small rodents will go down onto the ground and go up into the trees a little bit. But dormouse are very, very much stay in the trees, apart from when they're hibernating in the winter. So the predators would be primarily predators that go up into the trees. So stoats and weasels are more likely to be able to get them. Badgers and foxes probably would, but it would be more opportunistic if they came across them. So in the research literature, there's not a huge amount, but it's very little about predation. They would be predated. I haven't come across a situation where there's a sort of a learnt response, and possibly because for something like a badger, it would just be more opportunistic rather than a learnt thing.
And then just looking more at some of the questions. there are questions about the licensing process and volunteering and getting involved in that. And Michelle said that anybody at all who wants to know more about that, if you want to send us a message via our website or just any way, add it to the chat. Anybody who wants to know more, just let us have a contact and we can feed back some more information. But there is a question about, just tell us a little bit more about the licensing process. So what might be involved, what would the commitment?
So we have done a couple of public meetings where we've kind of talked about this in more detail. And if anybody is interested, please do get in touch. And it was very, very much part of the project right from the start. We do need licensed people who can give long-term commitment into the future to be going back and doing the monitoring of the dormouse populations to make sure that they're looked after into the future. The Boom project is 4 years. We've already had a year of it. We've got 3 more years left. So we're here for a while. We're also at the university. The university is here to stay. Morecambe Bay Partnership is here to stay, and all the partners are. But we very much need local people locally who are interested enough to give time and that long-term commitment to it. So we really would love to hear. So we've done a few public meetings before COVID, and there was quite a number of people that were interested. But we'd love to hear from more people. It's fantastic, but it is also a big commitment. So the process itself, to build up enough experience, usually takes a couple of years of going out with somebody who already holds a license. So you would go out on a site survey and spend the day checking 200 boxes to see whether they've got dormice in. The person who has the license would initially be showing you how to, like you saw on the video, how to take the box down, how to get the animals out, how to age them and sex them and weigh them and do all that measuring. So first of all, you'd be doing it in an observational way, watching, and then when you'd been out quite a number of times, you would be trying to do that yourself and having a go under the supervision of the person with the license. Potentially in a site, you go out once a month, so from about April to May till October time. So once a month going out and checking all those boxes. And sometimes when I've been over to Yorkshire, we've checked 200 boxes and we found once we found 1 dormouse, sometimes 2. So to build up enough experience, like sometimes you just don't find the dormice, so you've got to keep on doing it. So that there's that process of going out and getting experience and building that up. And then there's a sort of process of a logbook where you record all the surveys that you've done and that you've handled adult dormice and juvenile dormice and in between dormice and baby dormice, and you've sexed them and you've done this all right and you build up all that. And then that gets sent to Natural England along with 2 references of people who've witnessed you doing all of this. So somebody who already has a license would write a reference, and then Natural England are the licensing body, and it's Natural England that make the final decision as to whether the evidence you provide is enough to provide you with the license. So I'm not trying to make it sound onerous, just trying to explain it is quite an in-depth process. It is fantastic. It is, it's a long-term involvement, and to have a number of people in the area would be amazing. And within the project, that was very much built into it. So there is, if anybody is interested, there is support and training to go through that process. So please do get in touch through me, through the contact details, or Michelle.
Have I understood correctly that it's predominantly a summertime activity? It's not a wintertime activity?
Yeah, exactly, because they're sleeping. So they hibernate from about October to, depending on weather conditions, April, May.
Yeah. So for those of us who spend the winter months in more tropical climes to avoid the worst of the damp, it's an ideal volunteering activity. That's terrific. just one or two more questions about the dormouse itself, because you've shown us these pictures which are utterly adorable. Are they nocturnal? How good or bad is their eyesight? How fast do they move? Do they bite? Do they bite you if you're handling them?
So yes, they're nocturnal, yeah, so fairly strictly nocturnal. So we're hoping to try and put some trail cameras up and pick up some nighttime images of that, but it's quite hard to get that footage. So they're nocturnal, arboreal, so they're up in the trees. What are the other ones? How fast? I've seen them run up trees, so they're kind of like squirrel fast.
Okay.
So if you think
Pretty
of
nippy.
a red squirrel running around a tree, they're kind of like that sort of speed. So yeah, pretty nippy. They don't have the like wood mice have that kind of manicness about them. The kind of mad jumping, and I always feel like a little bit hesitant about handling wood mice, even though they're tiny, because they bite really easily. Dormice seem really, I've been bitten once, and it was more of a kind of a gentle, like, oh, get off me, rather than I've been bitten by squirrels and they've like hung on like that. Yeah. They're nice.
And how good or bad is their eyesight?
Oh, their eyesight. Now, I don't know if you can see on the pictures that they've got, their eyes are quite bulbous, so they're black and quite bulbous. So they're nocturnal, so they're not primarily relying on eyesight. They have got a lot of whiskers, and so that it's thought that they're using their whiskers for moving around, more so than the eyesight.
And we've got a question here from Duncan asking, what evidence should I look for that a dormouse is present in an area?
That's a good question as well. So one method of surveying them, looking for them without, so if you don't have, so you have to have a license to check in the nest boxes. So if you don't have a license, or if you're just in woodland and you're wondering, you can look for nuts that have been eaten by dormice, and they are really distinctive. I did debate about whether to put a picture into this presentation as well, but it felt like a bit of a diversion. But if you've seen a nut that's been eaten, so you imagine a hazelnut, and then imagine a hole in it about smaller than a penny, like an old half pea hole in it. And the thing that's distinctive about the dormouse is that the way that they make that hole is by going round, so the teeth marks are kind of horizontal in line with the hole into the nut, whereas other mice and voles and things, the teeth marks are perpendicular to it. So the pattern of the teeth marks on the nut is very distinctive of whether there's dormice. So looking for nuts that have been eaten is a good way. The footprint tunnels that I showed you, you can actually buy them online, and they're remote and non-invasive, so people without a license can do that. So you put the tube into a tree, and there's a little bit of charcoal in olive oil. So the dormouse walks over the charcoal and then onto the paper, and it leaves those footprints, which are really distinctive. And you're obviously not handling the animal, and it isn't invasive at all. So you can look for dormice that way.
I think as we're getting past 8 o'clock, I think I'm just going to take a couple more questions, and I think probably it would be time to close then. But there is a question here from Fiona saying, how often would they breed in the summer season?
They can breed twice if they're, and so either once or twice in the year. So late spring, and then they can have a second brood sort of late summer, early autumn. The second brood are much less successful into the next year, and there can be up to about 80% mortality, so really quite high mortality of the juveniles. So So it very much depends on the weather and the food sources that are available in the woodland. And there's a critical size that they have to get to, about 18 or 20 grams, to be much more likely to be able to survive the winter. So the parents might be, but it's quite hard for the young ones, for the offspring of the second brood, to be able to get to that size over that short kind of late summer, autumn time, to be able to go into hibernation. So they can breed twice, but the second brood it tends to be a lot less successful. And obviously for the female, it uses more energy to have a second brood, so it decreases her likelihood of survival as well.
Thank you, everybody who have joined us. I know I'm just starting to see 1 or 2 people leaving, so thank you so much. But Debs, have you got a picture? Could you either show us the slide or bring your camera right up against that?
I think this sums up my kitchen. That I could run down and grab some nuts. So I haven't got a picture easily, but if I just, so you can see what that's like. And so what I'm showing you is just that there's sort of the typical size hole, like I was saying, about kind of a half P. I know that you can't see clearly on here, but what you're looking for when you pick them up, so that might have been eaten by different rodent species, but what you're looking for that's distinctive about dormice is this sort of inside edge of the shell, the case of the nut. If it's in and out, so perpendicular, then it's not dormouse. If it's sort of striations, lines that follow the line of the circle, then that is indicative of dormice. Could you see that okay-ish? I'll get the idea anyway.
That's terrific. I would very much like, on behalf of everybody, to thank you so much, Debs, for sharing your knowledge and for sharing some incredibly beautiful pictures. It was absolutely lovely. And I think you've inspired so many people to think more about whether they would like to be a volunteer, and whether or not you are prepared to put in the sort of the longer term commitment that Debs has described. If you want to get involved in any way, if you just send us a message, get in touch with us, get in touch with Michelle, and we'll be in touch again. And many of you
just is really important, Susanna, because the whole licensing thing is a really big commitment, but there is lots and lots of opportunity for other things within the project, even just coming out for a day or two and helping put up some boxes, or coming along to a public meeting and helping. I know that there's somebody watching here tonight, Jenny, who's been fantastic over lockdown doing research about the history of dormice in the area as well. So lots of different areas to get involved with if you're interested. Sorry, Susanna.
No, that's exactly the message that I was giving, is that you don't have to put in the commitment for the whole 2 years and going to Yorkshire and finding lots of empty boxes. Sorry, Michelle, I know you're from Yorkshire. let's not enter into the challenges of that. So thank you once again, Debs. I think all of us would like to thank you very much for your talk this evening.